On the 28th of March 2026, I attended the book launch of a collection of essays called The Waters That Raised Us at Photo Gallery Cathays in Cardiff. That collection of essays is the subject of today's episode. Hello everyone and welcome back to Spare a Thought. We're now up to episode 57 of the podcast, would you believe? The show originated from me studying an MA in political communication at Cardiff University's School of Journalism. My focus for most of the show so far has been on people, issues and organisations and ideas being underreported or misrepresented in the media. Now, however, I want to switch things up a little bit. Spare a Thought is now the podcast for curious minds, exploring creativity, culture and stories from the margins. This broader canvas helps me stick to the show's roots, whilst also exploring new areas of investigation. Today, I'm starting the new format with a culture episode. You'll hear from 3 writers who have all contributed to the writing of The Waters That Raised Us, an anthology of essays about personal reflections in relation to water and whales. My guests are the editor and one of the authors of the book, Taylor Edmonds, alongside Kathryn, Tann and Sofia, Brizio. So here's The Waters That Raised Us, starting with Taylor Edmonds. Enjoy.
So The Waters That Raised Us is an anthology of creative nonfiction, like mini essays that I've edited. It came out, last month now because we're in April, which is crazy, with Seren. And it was basically, Seren invited me for a meeting and they were interested in some sort of nonfiction kind of piece from me, and I had this idea, I suppose, of like an anthology instead. I hadn't edited, I'd done bits of editing, but I hadn't edited like a whole book kind of thing before, but I was up for the challenge. And I'd been writing about kind of water and the impact of kind of rising sea levels, you know, pollution and all of these kind of things that are going on in Wales in my writing for a while, because I did a residency with the Future Generations Commissioner for Wales, and I think that was in like 2021, 22. And within that, I did a lot of work around flooding and rising sea levels in Wales in particular. I worked with communities in South Wales and in Llanrwst in North Wales that are victims of flooding like multiple times a year. And I just created like some work that just shows what's at stake really, and how urgent this actually is, that is already happening. You know, I think people sometimes feel like climate change is like some faraway thing that's maybe impacting people in the global south, you know, in the Caribbean. Obviously, we see the devastating impacts of that there now, but it is also happening here and it is very real. And I think people can sometimes not really appreciate the gravity of something unless they really see their stake in it. Like, we are just kind of selfish beings sometimes. So in The Waters That Raised Us, I wanted to invite writers that I admire to kind of write about the bodies of water that they like know and love and that have had an impact on them. And I think it can really be that simple in demonstrating like how important the water that you know is to you, how it's kind of shaped who you've become, even perhaps, you know, can demonstrate what's at stake to be lost from climate change. So the title, The Waters That Raised Us, is inspired by a essay in Robin Wall-Kimmerer's book Braiding Sweetgrass. If you haven't read it, I'd really recommend. She's a Native American writer and she's also a botanist. She also like brings her cultural background to her writing. So so in Braiding Sweetgrass, they're kind of like mini essays in that book as well. And there's one about the strawberries in the field behind the house that she grew up in. And she writes about the strawberries of something that raised her. So I was really like, this really spoke to me because I've grown up by the sea, always had this like massive connection to it. And she talked about the strawberries not just as like something that, you know, is nice to look at or she can go and pick fresh fruit from and they're delicious. They were something that had like actual personhood, like they could raise her. They had like an active role in shaping who she became. And then I just kind of, that really spoke to me. So I ran with that for the title, and the title was like the first thing that I came up with. So then I asked 9 writers to kind of write basically that simple brief, write about a body of water through the lens of the climate emergency. And that is what kind of formed this book, basically. People within it tell like a breadth of different stories. There's stories about the sea, there's stories about rivers, a waterfall, a reservoir, a pool, from all their different perspectives. But it just showed me like the role that water has in people's lives is beyond, just that's something that's nice to have. It's something that's integral to who we are and who we become. And in turn, that means that it really needs to be protected and valued as such.
I went to the launch yesterday. I hadn't really thought about the relationship with water in its different forms. Whenever I think of water, I just think of the sea or the river, So it's interesting to like mention reservoirs, reservoirs are quite weird. Like they're quite eerie and they're just, very expansive. And they're quite strange places. But obviously in lockdown, our natural world became far more, I think, more immediate to people because they're like, oh, I've been inside for so long. If I can just go to the reservoir or go to the beach and have a walk, and
your local, we all got to know like the pockets of nature that were local to us, whether that's literally like a tiny park or whatever you've got in walking distance. We got to know them so much better, didn't we? Realize how important they are when like everything else was shut down, and that was like all that we really had.
Yeah, exactly. And then realizing how much, like in Cardiff, like how much is concreted over as well, or people have got slabs rather than actual grass in their garden, and all that sort of stuff. I think I only started to realize the relationship with nature more. I mean, I love being in nature, but I appreciated it more.
Yeah, I think that was the case for a lot of people, definitely.
And how did you sort of go about choosing those writers?
I suppose when you start an anthology, there's two ways you can do it. You can either have your wish list of writers and approach them, or you could open up for submissions where you invite people to, submit some work and consider them that way. We didn't have the capacity. I'm the sole editor, although, that's a great way to do it because it would open you up to writers that you may not know, but write incredible work. But yeah, I didn't have the capacity to read through submissions. So I just approached people who I thought would write something interesting. Some of them engaged with the kind of like nature and climate already in their work, some of them not so much. I also tried to kind of get a, diversity of locations, of just the people within the voices as well. So you'll kind of see that some of the writing's based in South Wales, some in West, Mid, and then some in North Wales too. So I wanted to kind of capture the different areas of Wales. And yeah, it was just led by that, really. I just kind of contacted people who I thought I really want to hear what they've got to say about this. And yeah, I ended up with 9 incredible writers who wrote brilliant pieces. So it was a joy to work with them and to refine their work into the finished product that it is now.
And now let's hear from Kathryn Tann, author of the essay in the anthology called The Edge.
So I'm Kathryn Tann. I'm a writer, an essayist, a nature writer, I suppose. And I also run a magazine called Folding Rock. So I spend a lot of my time supporting other writers, but it's really nice to be here as a writer myself.
Yeah. So you're actually focused on your work rather than the work of others. Oh. What's the name of the piece or the pieces in the book that we've contributed?
So I've written an essay called The Edge. The Edge is about a place called Sunny Island in the Bay of Glamorgan. It started off being a piece about the tides, and it ended up being a piece about what changes and what stays the same, and the sort of edge being the edge of the land, the coast, but also the edge of experience, maybe being the edge of like social situations, not always being comfortable in the middle, wanting to escape, that kind of thing. So it tracks my childhood and teenage years and into adulthood, but through this sort of strange tidal island that I've known my whole life in South Wales.
Yeah, and probably something quite unique that other people might not know necessarily about. Was that sort of part of it too?
Yeah, it's I really love nature writing, and I'm really interested in the sort of science and natural history behind sort of interesting places, particularly coastlines. So I was able to sort of weave in the workings of the tide, but also the history of the place, like the sort of geological history of the place. And I love that kind of thing, especially when you sort of put that against personal experience, and also the kind of changing. I've been really interested in change lately with my writing, so looking at deep time change, but also personal change, and also we live in such times of change, especially now.
Yeah.
So.
And how did you get involved in being involved in the book itself? How did that happen?
So I've known Taylor for a while, but I think probably it sprung from a conversation we had on my podcast called This Place, and we sat on the harbour wall in Barry Island, and the tide was coming in, and we were talking about Barry and what it meant, and I think she knew I was particularly interested in writing on water. My first essay collection, Sea Glass, has a lot of water in it. Yeah. I've written a lot about
two-person
theatre.
Yeah.
I think if I'd known she was doing this and she hadn't asked me, I would have been upset.
Okay.
But I think I probably sprung to mind when she was thinking of writers to get involved in this particular theme, and obviously I was delighted to do it.
It was really nice to get like a snapshot of the different to hit. The one thing I really love is going to things like book launches or events where writers or creatives are talking about their work, because you're able to get behind the scenes. You're able to connect the person with the work. But I also love listening to people's work aloud when they're reading. The writer is reading their work, because there's something different about it.
It's not how you would read it in your head, is it? You hear that in the unique voice. So and like you said, everyone kind of describes how it came about. You get a bit more of the context, and there's such interesting context in this book. There's Malachi's essay where he writes about the River Taff, and his family is like deep rooted into the fact where he even has like a great uncle who was murdered and his body was found in the river. So not only that, but he grew up along the river, and there's kind of like this echo in his family, which is really interesting. And then you have Sofia, who is a para swimmer and learned how to love her body through being in the water.
As Taylor mentioned her, I thought it was a good time to bring in Sofia Brizio to talk about her approach to writing and her essay, Inside a Blue Mind.
My name is Sofia Brizio. I'm a writer and a PhD student, and the name of my piece in the anthology is Inside a Blue Mind. So I chose this title because I was inspired by the Blue Mind theory by Wallace Nichols, which says that proximity to water naturally makes us kind of calmer and more balanced, and so blue spaces put us in a blue mind state. I truly believe that I have a sort of permanently blue mind, because being in the water is the only thing that calms my nervous system. And I really feel like I can't exist without swimming. I was born with a disability, and when I was a child, doctors recommended that I swim to help my muscles and joints. So I used to hate it because I kind of saw it as very medicalized. But then I joined a competitive team and started racing, and I realized I loved it because I could do things in the water that my body wouldn't be able to do on land. So I guess in this sense, the body of water that raised me is the swimming pool, seeing as I grew up in northern Italy, kind of close to the mountains, and I didn't have any natural bodies of water close to me. But I did go to the seaside on school holidays, either summer in Italy or in the south of France. And it was by learning to swim in the sea that I also learned to respect and fear water in its kind of unpredictable nature. And I realized truly how much we risk losing to climate change. I've always been terrified of jellyfish. And one of the memories I talk about in the piece is the day I found out that new deathly poisonous jellyfish were coming to the Mediterranean Sea because of the change in water temperature. That's the first thing that got me thinking that water, that up until that point had been my safe space, might not be that safe forever after all. So yeah, I started thinking about the extent of climate change and pollution and how that means that in a not so distant future it might not be safe to swim in nature anymore, and what that would do to us as humans, obviously, but I guess more selfishly to my identity as a paraswimmer. So to me, swimming, I guess, is not just a sport, but it's also a huge source of creativity, because I do a lot of thinking while I swim. So I would say a lot of the time swimming is also part of my creative process. I swim to write, but I'd never written about swimming before. So I am really grateful to Taylor for asking me to write the piece and kind of encouraging me to think about new ideas that I'd never experimented with before. So yeah, this is the story behind my piece.
And here's Sofia reading from Inside a Blue Mind.
In the water is where I feel most normal. I say this to my friend on a beach in the south of France the summer of our graduation. I have never admitted it to anyone, not out loud. We swim together and I don't have to struggle to keep up like I would on land. I can get in and out of the water as I please. The sea is calm and welcomes me in its embrace. Safe in its sapphire glow, soothed by the sound of the waves, I put my head under water to look at the sandy seabed, and I feel at peace with the world. I come back up for air and marvel at the perfect blue sky, gaze at the hills and white cliffs in the distance, and the wind hits my face with its smell of pine and bougainvillea. I am centered, I am normal. What is normal anyway? I have many issues with this word, after years spent trying to accept a body that was so often labelled as non-conforming at best and not normal at worst. But ask any disabled person, and there will be an environment where they can stop thinking about their condition and the state of the world, at least for a few moments. That environment for me is water. Being born with cerebral palsy and using mobility aids means that I've always struggled with balance and coordination. Playing ball during PE was my worst nightmare. The ball seemed to invariably end up on my face or slam painfully on my nose, no matter how hard I tried to catch it and throw it. Every waking moment, every single step was a gamble in a world where gravity was my worst enemy. Will I trip up on my own feet and fall? Will my wheels get stuck on a curb? When I was in primary school, I wanted to become an astronaut. I would dream of the vast silence and absence of gravity space would afford me. The freedom I now feel when swimming is an echo of that childhood dream. It was not easy to get there. I had to fight against my own fear of water, a wonderful element but mighty and unpredictable. I had to fight against a society that didn't think I'd ever be able to walk, talk and breathe, let alone swim. Now it's easy to think of water as my own galaxy to explore. Like an astronaut on the moon, I bounced on the sand before diving in the infinite blue of the sea. Spots of reflected sunlight dance around me like planets. Every fish is a star to chase. The world feels so far away and I can forget I live on land. Like space, water is powerful, even scary, but it will become your best friend if you know how to treat it. Swimming in the Mediterranean Sea with my friend that day, I've never felt freer.
Here's Taylor.
So there's like just different perspectives, different people coming from different different places, and they all come together with those similar threads of just like how important the water can be to us and our lives, which kind of ties it all together.
And also the urgency of it too, that the commentary there yesterday was like, we see the 1.5 degrees versus 2 degrees and what impact that has. But actually, we talk about global warming, we talk about the effect on the wider world, but these stories demonstrate the impacts locally, and it's tangible seeing the difference there.
Yeah, you see, like, and that's where I think, art and creativity comes into it, is that it has this ability to like humanize and demonstrate what these issues actually look like, because you can read the stats and the figures, but naturally with exposure to the news, like, we do become desensitized to what that actually means and what that looks like. So I feel like the role of the artist in the fights against climate and other forms of injustice as well is to just like humanize these and tell stories and show people what it actually looks like in a way that they can relate to and that they can see themselves in.
This is a short extract from my essay Watermarks, and it begins in the old harbour in Barry. My nephews, 4 and 2 years old, are running towards the sea. As soon as they saw it, they abandoned their bikes in the sand to take off on this new quest. I run with them, our bare feet slapping on the wet sand. It's spring. The air still has a cool bite, and there's nobody but us brave enough to meet the water. I hesitate at the edge of the foam, anticipating the cold, while they run straight in, yelping in delight as the water soaks their shorts. I grab their hands, fearful that they will get caught up in one of the waves. They splash me until the water doesn't sting anymore. I watch their awe as we look out to the Severn estuary, where somewhere on the other side, Minehead or Weston-super-Mare, sheets of misty rain fall, making it seem as if nothing is ahead of us. They are fascinated and scared by the tiny translucent crabs we spot washed up onto the sand. My oldest nephew tells me the sea is magic. I'm glad that they get to grow up alongside the water like me. Wherever I've gone in my life, I've sought the sea. There's a sense of unease in my stomach, claustrophobia in my chest when I am not in easy reach of the water. At the beach with my nephews, for a second, I pretend we are at the end of the earth.
In your piece, you talk about there's a strange nostalgia returning to old places, knowing you're not the same person anymore. And that felt like that running through. And your piece sort of straddles between Wales and then Barbados, and your own sort of identity and heritage there sort of linked to it. Could you talk about that, about nostalgia and writing? And
so that kind of element definitely comes from moving back to Barry, where like I grew up here. I left when I was 18 to go to uni, then lived in Cardiff, and then moved back to Barry at the age of like, I don't know, 28 or something like that. And I literally live now like a 10-minute walk from where I grew up. So returning to the place that raised you, but like coming back older and not the same person, like for a year or so, like it felt a bit strange, even though it wasn't like I had never been to Barry since then. But I don't know, the way that when you live somewhere, you just know the streets and everything so intimately. And I literally did already know these streets in that way. And just coming back, and yeah, it was just a bit weird. Like there is just like a weird nostalgia to, I write about the old harbour in the essay as somewhere that I, have so many memories of, like being a teenager in particular, and going there with my friends and talking about like what we were going to do with our lives and who we were going to become, and the sea kind of being a witness to those conversations.
I remember sitting on the edge of the same wall with my friends before I left for university, our legs swinging against the stone. We were all on the cusp of something, our new lives. University, jobs, finding ourselves in unfamiliar places. We'd have long conversations about who we would become, what we were going to do. I wanted to write poems and books. My friends wanted to design clothes, care for people, become midwives. We would speak our dreams to each other and to the sea as the tide rolled to be carried somewhere beyond our reach.
And then coming back there now and like sitting on that same wall and being that person that I once spoke about, obviously not exactly who I thought I would be, but it's just like I'm quite interested in the way that we echo through time in that way, and also how that connects us with family. Like generations of my family have grown up here and also in Barbados as well. So when I got to go there for the first time, there was this feeling of like, you know, there's echoes of like people that I'm, you know, my ancestors that I'm connected to in some weird, like intangible way. And just being there with that knowledge. Yeah, there's some strange feeling that's really difficult to put into words about that, but I try my best.
Yeah, and what I find really interesting and very moving is that obviously quite a lot of monumental things happened when you're in Barbados, because you were turning 30, you got engaged as well, but then also your family turn up
Yeah.
in the piece, which I found really moving, and the description of your grandfather in the sea, and yeah, I just and that idea of seeing that a young boy again in all of
Yeah,
it was
that's how I
really
thought of him. Like, you know, he's in his 70s now, and he'd been back to the island, but not as you know, we had a car, so we could really like drive to the village that he grew up, and just watching him be there, and I could see it in his face, like what a homecoming it was for him. So I felt like really lucky to have that experience with him, but it just made me imagine what he was like as a boy. And we see our family members, you know, especially my you know, he's my granddad, so he's always been like old in a way since I was born, and just imagining him in a different space and time, it was just, yeah, it goes back to those echoes, right, of the places that we've been, and what we leave and what it means to return. There's something really interesting in there.
Yeah, and to go to somewhere that probably might have been a bit mythologized as well. You know, you hear about this faraway place,
Yeah,
even where the color of the water is different. You know, rather than the sort of like muddy water to something.
yeah, it's not an estuary, and it is as bright blue and clear as you think it's going to be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but then also you do recognize that some of the experiences that you're having in Barbados are very much the touristy. You know, there was a bit of that, and also the thing about access to beaches as well. Like
Yeah,
99%
so
of
there's a whole
beaches.
section in the essay where I talk about access to beaches in the Caribbean, more so in Jamaica, where only 1% or even less than 1% of beaches are, you know, for the public. A lot of them are owned by hotels or landowners, who restrict access to the Jamaican people. Sometimes they have to have like a pass that they have to pay for to access the beach. And really that is just kind of like the legacy of colonialism. But there is like amazing activist groups there which are kind of fighting back and trying to bring in new laws to get the access. And the great thing about Barbados is that there are locals at the beach everywhere. Like, you know, they do kind of have that experience in a way that just, you know, a different island doesn't. It's yeah, it was definitely important for me to acknowledge that, yeah, this is my, you know, ancestral heritage, but also I am a visitor, I am a tourist, and like I am having that experience of the place as a tourist as well. So just being mindful of that, like as you should be when you travel, right? Like with the place that you come from and how it influences your experience, even if you do have that kind of heritage connection.
Yeah, you have to sort of tread lightly, don't you? Because it's not, it belongs to someone else.
Exactly, yeah.
That brings to a close this episode of Spare a Thought. The Waters That Raised Us is available to purchase from Seren Books. My thanks to Taylor, Kathryn and Sofia for your contributions. Please be sure to like, subscribe, comment and share with your family, friends, colleagues and schoolmates. The title track for this show is Young Shall Grow. Credit and thanks to Afro Cluster, Magugu, and Asha Jane. Spur of Thought is a Be the Change Media Network production. Thanks for listening.
Whether you like them or not, young shall grow. Better fill them with love. Then them go know. In this life you don't give up. Even when you know, if you fall, get back up. Young shall